Looks good.
Hey, Paul, can you hear me? You there? All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for taking time on this Friday afternoon to do a quick walkthrough of Azure Backup and Azure Files. I decided to put this topic out there because actually I've had some customers ask me about this and went through a couple of walkthroughs as far as setting up Azure Backup and Azure Files, and I thought it'd be a really good place to start just to sort of get your feet wet with Azure and get some immediate benefit out of it. So this should be a pretty straightforward walkthrough. We're just going to do two separate scenarios, and let's just go ahead and check it out and see how this is going to look. So the first one that we're going to talk about is setting up Azure Backup. And before we do that, I'd like to just explain how it works, and then I'll walk you through setting it up. It's very straightforward. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to have an Azure subscription. So hopefully you have one. If not, you can sign up for a free one, and this is all going to be available through your free trial if you so choose to do that. The thing that we're going to talk about as far as Azure Backup is going to live in this thing called Recovery Services Vaults. There's something else that uses those. It's called Azure Site Recovery. We are not going to be doing Azure Site Recovery today. We're just going to be focusing on Azure Backup. And let me kind of explain how it's going to work. You're going to need to download an agent based on the server operating system that you've implemented or that you want to install this on. So what I did for purposes of this walkthrough is I just installed it on the Windows 10 machine that I have. There's one for Server 2012 that you can download, and there's a 64-bit and I do believe a 32-bit version of the client that are out there. So you're going to need to install that, and once you install that, that's going to need to have access, obviously, to the shares of the files that you're going to want to back up. And I should point out that you can actually do more than just file and shares with this, but that's all we're going to do for this particular walkthrough today. Now, what it's going to do is we're going to need to, once we download that agent, we're going to need to register it with the Recovery Services Vault. I'm going to walk you through this process so you can see how it works. And once we do that, we're pretty much home free, and we can set up backup jobs, and we can pump our files up to Azure services. So we'll go ahead and do a quick walkthrough of that, and then we'll come back and take a look at implementing a file share in Azure. So I'm going to switch over to my console here. All right, so let's go through this. The first thing we're going to want to do is create a vault, like I said. So how are we going to do that? Well, you can actually just come up here and just in search when you click on add. So I clicked on add. I'm just going to come up here and type recovery services. And if you scroll down, you can see I've actually used this before. It's called Backup and Site Recovery Services, OMS. Keep in mind, there's two products that are actually going to work on this. So we're just going to focus on Azure Backup, or two services, I should say. And let's go ahead and I'm going to type in a name. It does need to be a unique name, so I'm going to just do SRE Demo Vault. I'll call it 4. Now, what this will do is it's going to check and make sure that this is a valid name and that you're not going to have a collision with another namespace. So we'll go ahead and see if that takes that. It did. You have the ability to put this in, an existing subscription. I only have one, so I'm just going to go ahead and choose my own subscription. And then you also have the ability to put this into a resource group. So it's going to need to live in a subscription that's going to be in a resource group that's going to be inside a subscription. I actually, for demos, I put most of my stuff in a resource group called Demo Resource Group. And since I'm in Florida on the East region, I'm just going to go ahead and create this in the East Data Center. So once we do that, we're actually going to kick off a job, and you can see it running over here. It's not really going to take that long. But I do want to mention that while that's running, let me show you the backup agent. You will need to, and we're going to be prompted to do this, but you're going to need to download the backup agent. This is what it looks like. And we'll come back to that in just a little bit. I do think my job finished, so it did. All right, so once you come back to this is the Recovery Services Vault. There's a lot of different things that you can see with this particular blade. The thing that you're going to need to do is come down here to where it says Getting Started and select Backup, not Site Recovery. Remember I mentioned there's two things you can do. Site Recovery, you might have seen the session that we did a couple of weeks back with John Kelbley, and he focused on this particular aspect. Here we're going to focus just on Backup. So let's go up here. It's going to bring up this blade, and it's going to ask us what our backup goal is. So this is really important. Let's kind of go over here and discover what these text boxes mean. Where is our workload going to be running? Well, we could back up from Azure to another Azure resource if we wanted to, but what we're going to do, and what I find most folks are interested in, is they want to do a backup of on-premises assets, to be linguistically correct. So what we'll need to do after that is actually, once I tell it that I'm going to be running on-premise, I'm going to need to specify my files and folders. You might recall how I mentioned that there's other things that I can back up, and here they are: SQL servers, things that actually have high volatility, SharePoint, things like that, Exchange server. We're just going to focus on files and folders for this particular demo. I need to make sure that I select that and make sure you hit OK. And then it's going to take you to this other option, kind of like a wizard. We're just going to walk through this. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to show you where to go download the agent. And if you click on this, it's going to take you to a website. I'm not going to do that because I've already installed this, but just know that there's going to be two different flavors of this agent. One's going to be for the Windows client, and one's going to be for Windows Server Essentials, or Windows Server. So it will run on Windows Server. Just go ahead and pick the one that's appropriate for you. It'll take you to a download page for that. And then you're going to need to go through an install on that. And that's the client that I was just showing you. So the next thing that you're going to need to do, and this is really important because this is how we're going to actually register the server with the Vault. And we're going to need to download the credentials. And so I'm going to go ahead and just do a Save As. And you notice that it names it for me already. Hopefully you can see this. And I'm just going to put it in downloads, but it's going to be S3 Demo Vault 4. I'm going to go ahead and just click Save. Close this out. And then we're going to, essentially just close out of this because we're done. And let's let that finish up. Seems to be taking a little time for this. So there's a question, will it do bare metal too? What exactly do you mean by bare metal? You want to come off mute? You mean an image?
Yes, an image.
Yeah, and you can do an image, although it will back this up as a file. If you want to back up an actual image, then you're going to need to go over to Site Recovery. And Site Recovery is the tool to actually do that. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of that and try this again. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to switch over to my client, and we're going to go through the registration process. So when you load the client, it's going to look very similar to this, although you can see I've already had some jobs scheduled. Yours will probably be empty when you first start this out, but one of the actions that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to register the server. And so this is pretty important, especially for shops that are out there where you have a proxy server, which I would say probably 80 to 90% of you are going to have some kind of a proxy server before you actually get out to the internet. So you're going to need to enter that. This would be very similar to if you had a browser, probably would be the same type of configuration here and the same port configuration, but you will need to get access to the internet for that. Or I should say this server is going to need to get access. Now, I'm bare metal here. I'm open because I'm at home, so I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Again, it's kind of a wizard concept. Now what we got to do is we got to go to the download directory, and you can see this is the file that I just downloaded. What this file is it's encrypted, and it contains all the credentials for getting access to that vault. And if you open this up, it's not going to look like anything. There's only one reader for it, and it's the agent. So the agent's going to read that, and we'll come back. And then the next thing we'll need to do is generate a passcode. So it needs to be 16 characters, and you can type in whatever you want. You're just going to have to remember it. So I'm just going to do my own little code here. And you got to make sure, it's going to double check and make sure that you do it correct both times. Oops. And you're also going to want to store this. This is kind of like the yellow sticky of all this. You're going to want to put this someplace so that, because you're not going to get access to this vault unless you actually have this passphrase stored someplace. So you're going to want to put this in a safe place. I'm just going to go ahead and put it in a cloud drive that I have. And then register. And if everything goes according to plan, your server will be registered. And this is just telling you there's a new agent back that you could download for Windows 10. I don't want to do that right now. And there you go. The passphrase is stored here. If I ever want to go look at that, you can see what my key is for this. And I'm going to close that out. And the good news with this is that we're ready actually for business. We're open for business now. We can actually go in and schedule a job. And getting started, again, another wizard. Let's just walk through this. So what this is going to do is it's going to go and read your network environment and come back with a list of servers that you can back things up from. And now we're at the point where we can add items. So if you had some file servers that you wanted to back up or some shares that were important to you, you could actually just go in like this and select them. So I'm going to do that. I'm actually on a metered account, so I'm not going to select anything really big. Let me just go in and select some pictures. And I'll just select a couple of pictures here. And boom. So we've selected our pictures. Next thing we need to do is just like any other backup software, we're going to have to specify a schedule. I'm going to go ahead and schedule this for 2:30. One thing I've noticed about this is it only lets you do it in increments of 30 minutes. I don't believe, and if there's any CSAs on the phone that want to hop in and correct me, but I don't see how you can type like 2:15 or whatever. But so 2:30, we're going to kick off this job, and it's going to run daily. And I'm just going to go ahead and click next because it's just a demo. And here we can actually specify the retention policy. I'm just going to keep this for 5 days because it is just a demo, but this will be pretty important because after that it's going to roll things off. So you just need to find out what your retention period is going to look like, and what's important for you as far as how long you need to keep that. Go ahead and hit next. And this is interesting because this is addressing, we're going to go ahead and specify that we're going to do this over the network, but if we had a really, really big file, we could incur a lot of network charges, so you can actually do an offline version of this, in which case you need to publish it to an offline volume, and I'm not sure exactly the whole process here, but I believe it entails using Azure Import-Export to put that into, to ship it off to Azure and actually have it directly loaded. But 9 times out of 10, what you're going to want to do is just do it over the network, and we'll go ahead and select next. And then when you want to kick it off, we're going to start it right now, so the clock's going to start ticking, and boom. Oops, let's see. Not really sure why it did that. But it could just be, let's just chalk that up to, I think that might be something on my local network. I'm not really sure, but what should happen is you should be able to schedule a job that is just like these. And once you kick that off, you'll actually will be able to actually go and do the flip side of this, which is restore data. And what restore data is going to do, I don't know if I have any ones that are actually still ticking up there, but we can go through and we can browse volumes for files. And since I don't really have any up there right now, you're not going to be able to see this, but essentially we have to point it to the volume that I specified my backup from, and then you'll be able to actually go in at a file level and pick the files that you backed up, and you can restore those. You will need to pick a destination after you do that, and then it'll confirm that, and then you'll be good to go as far as restoring those particular files. And I should mention that this client is a free download. So with this client, you actually, and at your Azure subscription, you do have a full-fledged Azure backup solution. Let's go back to Azure. That's Azure Backup. Now let's go in and take a look at how easy it is to create a file share. So this goes back to I was talking to somebody and they said, hey, what I want is I want Azure to appear as a drive letter. And it turns out that that's really, really easy to do. I don't know if that's something that you might want to entertain doing, but they wanted to have Azure appear on their network as a drive letter to put certain types of files out to. Now keep in mind, when you do this, full disclosure, there's other products like Store Simple that do dedupe and compression. This does not do that. It basically is just making Azure look and smell like a file share on your network. But it's really, really easy to do, and let's go in and take a look at it. So again, we're going to go to New Resources, and this is all going to come under Storage. So one thing you need to know in the world of Azure is there's really, at a high level, there's three things that Azure has, and everything else kind of falls under these top three. There's compute, there's networking, and there's storage. Compute, IaaS, VMs, things like that. Networking, where those things live as far as setting up VNets. Storage, let's go ahead and take a look at that. The thing that you need to know is that anything that you create in Azure is going to live in something called a storage account. Now, this is going to change somewhat in the very near future with managed storage on the horizon, so there will be a change moving forward with this and how this is implemented, but for right now, you create your own storage accounts. Let's go ahead and do that. And again, we have to give it a unique name. And here's my name, and make sure it's okay. So sread storage account 1. Let's just kind of go through these. Deployment model, you will always want to select Resource Manager. Classic is going to take you to the Classic portal, and it's going to implement it in a slightly different way over in the Classic portal, which is manage.azure.com. We don't want to go there. We want to stay in what's called ARM or Resource Manager. There's a couple of different kinds of storage. Unless you know explicitly that you need blob, general purpose will be fine, and that's where ours is going to live. This is also going to affect your pricing. If you go over here, it'll kind of explain what that is. Premium is going to be SSDs, i.e. memory, and standard is really going to be good old-fashioned hard drive. So we're just going to go keep the cost down on this and select standard. There's various different replication models that you can use. We're going to go ahead and choose the most economical, but let me just kind of explain these. Locally redundant is the most economical. It means it's just going to live in one Azure data center. There are going to be 3 copies of it, but it will be within one particular data center. Zone redundant is a little different in that zone redundant is actually going to be at the same data center, but it's going to be on different power grids or racks. So it's a little more fault tolerant. GRS it's actually going to live in 2 data centers. So you're going to have 6 copies, 1 and 3 in one data center, 3 in another. And then read access geo redundant means that you actually will have readability with the GRS data. So that would be the highest tier there. We're going to select the lowest and keep it cheap. And do I want to enable encryption? So I'm going to not enable it, but if you want to have encryption at rest, you can encrypt that, and you can rest assured knowing that your data is encrypted at rest. The next thing here is it's going to, just like we saw with the Recovery Vault, we're going to have to pick a subscription. So I'm going to go ahead, since I only really have one sread subscription, I'm going to put it there. And then again, we have to drill it down into the resource group. Do I want to create a new one, or do I want to use an existing? Like I told you, I like to put all my stuff, my demo stuff, in demo resource group, and then it's going to live in the East region. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create, and this should not take too long to spin up, but you will see that Over here, it's deploying that. And since this is really just a container, we haven't put anything in there. It should implement this pretty quickly, and then we'll be able to go out, actually look at it, and see what we can do with it. Let's give it a minute here. All right, there we go. Hopefully you can see that. And we now have ourselves a storage account. So let's take a look at this. Storage account, these are the different things that we can set up in here. I'm going to do a brief little overview of these, and then we're going to come back and look at Azure Files because that's why we're here today. Each one of these could be a separate chalk talk, and we will probably have some in the future which dive into when and where you might want to use these different formats. Let me just first start talking about blobs. Blobs are very generic. They require on the application to know about the type of data that is being stored on them. And the thing really to take away from this is that they're great places to store videos and images where you just need to put something that might be large, somewhat large, and you need to have quick access to it. So blobs are great for that. Tables are a little bit different animal. They actually provide a structure, a semi-structured table with, but it's not a database. So you can think of it almost as rows and columns with no real definition to the rows or to the columns rather. That's again up to the application or whoever's accessing that to impose that. And then there's queues. Queues are good old-fashioned queues. If I want to send out or I want to put something in the queue and I want to have a bunch of clients read it, this is a great structure for that. Each one of these has their purposes in the cloud workload that you're supporting, but the one that we're here to talk about today are files. Now, what are files? I'm going to go ahead and click on it. Server message block, I think, is what SMB stands for. It's a protocol, a server protocol that's been around since the days, if you remember, the early days of networking of NetBEUI and things like that. It's basically a way. It's what gave us drive letters on volumes and things like that in servers. And really, essentially, what file service is a service that actually that supports SMB within Azure, and it's going to let us create this. And it's really this simple. I'm going to go ahead and click on File Share. I got to give it a name. And this is kind of neat. I can actually impose a quota on this. I can go up to 5120 gigabytes if I want to. So you can actually have size limitations. That's pretty important if you want to monitor your spend on this. I'm just going to go ahead and hit create now. And I've created a file share. So now if I select it, I can actually go out and I can do things that you probably are familiar with if you've ever worked in File Explorer. I can add a directory. And I'm just going to create a directory, and boom, there we have a directory. So you might be going, okay, that's great. How do I use it? Because it's pretty useless up here, right? Unless I actually can have this be connected from my on-premises environment. So what we have to do, and this is where it's incredibly easy, is use a net use command. So net use command is a command used on the command prompt. We're going to go through this in just a second. And it's what's going to let us create a drive letter for this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit copy. Noticing I'm not copying the whole thing yet. I'm going to come back and I want to explain what I'm copying and why. So let me bring up my command prompt. And I'm just going to paste what I have here. Oops, looks like it maybe didn't copy. All right, so hopefully you can see this. Let me just kind of go through this. Net use, I got to give this a drive letter. So you might remember the old days of networking, or you've seen networks where you have drive letters, and I'm just going to pick H colon on my drive. Oops. Try that again. We don't need this, but I do need this. So netuse, I'm going to create a drive. Now look what it's doing. It's actually using a URL that's pointing up to my Azure storage account. This is my Azure storage account right here. If you go back and look at the name, and this is everything that I need to get to it. Almost everything that I need to get to it, because there is one crucial element that I haven't copied yet, and that is the SAS key. Let me go over here and explain what this is. It's somewhat clunky to actually copy. You got to make sure you get the whole thing. Okay, let me explain this. I'm going to call this up in Notepad real quick just to show it to you. Oops. There we go. So this right here is a key that's going to get us access to our storage account. We're going to need this, or else we don't get in. So you can kind of think of this, and there's other ways to actually get this. You can go back to one of the parameters when you on the blade for the storage account, and it will give you this long encrypted key. But we are going to need that, so we're going to need to copy that. I want you to see what it looks like, and then let's come back. We're going to need to. The nice thing is we're just going to need to add it to the end of our command. So I come here and I just do paste, Control V. And if everything goes according to plan right now, we should, oops, we should map a volume out. Let me try that again. I think it might not like my H drive. Let me try something else here. Well, seem to be having a little bit of an issue, but what should happen is it should map that volume to that, and we should be able to actually post that up on a share. Not really seeing why it's not working. Let me try it one more time here. All right. Net is G colon. Right. Let's see if this works. We'll give it one more shot. Well, the demigods aren't with me today, but what should happen is if we do that, and I'll have to go back and see, there's obviously some kind of typo going on, but we should be able to go back and you would see that this would map itself out on a drive letter um, on my local network. But it's not working today. Must be running into a little typo here. And what last thing I'll just mention with this is that there are two formats for this. Is one is you can do it from Windows, and the other one is slightly different if you do it from Linux. So that's what I wanted to show you today. Any questions about this?
Hey, Steve, this is Jeffrey. One thing I want to add too is I actually had an issue with this trying to do it from home. So some internet service providers block port 445. So you might need to open up that port if you want to use this. And it's also where Steve is pointing. It's listed in the portal as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually had this working earlier this morning, so but that's a really good point, Jeffrey. I think it's probably just the one thing about this is the typo of copying this whole text here is not it's kind of clunky, but I think if you actually go in this and you do go in and copy everything and make sure that you do the replace the drive letter, this should work for you. Now keep in mind, you'll need to do this on a server that has access, from the client machines that want to get access to it. But it's a nice solution, and as soon as you can go in and do a net use and delete that, and you've severed your connection. But that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Jeffrey.
Do you need to add trusted sites in order for this to work? So like maybe add Microsoft site in order for this to work?
So let me make sure I understand. Do you need to add trusted sites?
Yes.
No, you don't. You just need to have access to the site.
Hey, Steve, it's Haley. I have a question.
Sure.
When would you recommend using Azure Files versus a Store Simple device?
That's a great question. So my 2 cents on that would be that Azure Files is great if you just want to have Azure appear as a drive letter on your network and have people, create a share, and you want those shares to actually live in the cloud. And keep in mind that when you do that, you're going to have, remember the locally redundant, zone redundant, you're going to have all that benefit. And that's it, pretty much from an Azure backup standpoint. So what does Store Simple bring? Store Simple actually does dedupe, compression. It presents itself on your SAN as another volume and basically leverages Azure to expand the capacity of your storage area network. So Store Simple is a much more robust enterprise-ready solution that I think companies and SLG customers would get a lot more benefit out of.
Thanks, Steve.
So any other questions? All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody for attending on this Friday. Hopefully this was useful. We recorded it. I will send this out, the recording, as soon as I get it posted out to YouTube. And in 2 weeks, we'll have another Chalk Talk. Look for, we're having issues with the Skype bridge, so just to go over that, I'm going to probably just delete the current invite and resend a brand new one, and hopefully all these bridge issues will go away. But apologies about that. But have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Steve.
Steve. Bye, everyone.